with the latest on the corporate front, all the market trends, expert opinion, and sound business advice. It is your unique window into the business world, direct from the heart of China.
Hello and welcome to Beats Today. I'm your sitting host, Ge Anna, coming to you from our studio in Beijing. Economic figures for the first half of the year are out, and China's performance has exceeded forecasts. Its GDP grew by 5.3%, foreign trading goods increased by 2.7%, hitting a record high, while exports jumped more than 7%. What explains China's resilience amid the trade war launched by the United States? What's driving China's strong economic growth? To delve into this and more, let's bring in Dr. Yao Shujie, Chang Hong Professor of Economics at Chongqing University. Great to have you on our show, Professor.
Hi, nice to join you.
Professor Chu Qiang, Fellow of Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China. Thanks for joining us as always, Professor.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Gentlemen, let's begin with the big picture. Official data show that China's GDP grew by 5.3% in the first half of this year, alongside record-breaking export numbers. Professor Yao, how do you interpret the economic momentum behind these numbers?
When I read the statistics figure, I was very thrilled. I think it's very encouraging and very positive for the Chinese economy because the external environment and also the internal pressure seems to be very, very high and somewhat beyond most people's expectation. Many people predicted about 5%, but in reality it's 5.3%. What is striking to me is that the export sector, because since April, the United States has imposed ridiculous tariff rate. And many people would expect the Chinese export will be quickly hit due to the high tariff. But to my surprise, China's total export increased by 7.2%, which is much higher, of course, than our import. That means that the demand of Chinese goods and services from the rest of the world is very strong. And China has been capable of diversifying the export destination away from the United States and to other countries, especially the Belt and Road Initiative country, ASEAN, to some extent, Africa and also South Asia, Latin America. This is very good for China because China's export diversification and China's ability to increase the technical and quality contents of the export goods is the key driving factors for the resilience of the domestic economy. Another factor is due to the legalization of financial and monetary policy. The central bank, the central government, and the Ministry of Finance, and also the Economic Planning Commission, they all work together to have a concerted effort on the national economy development and the consumption stimulus package, the subsidy to domestic appliances and also vehicles, especially the new energy vehicle, the demand increased very strongly. This gives a very strong stimulus to the domestic growth and investment, particularly the private sector and also the state sector. They work together to have a rather strong investment performance in the first half year. So China's economic performance in all round way turned out to be surprisingly very resilient and very good for producing the current dynamic economic conditions.
Mm-hmm. Professor Chu, we often hear about China's resilience in economic terms. What's your take on this? And considering the current global backdrop with high uncertainty and softer external demand, China has managed to outperform expectations. What are the main driving forces behind this growth?
Well, I think there are multiple reasons behind that. Number one, I think, is that the domestic market of China is very resilient. China has 1.4 billion of population, and the middle income class has been keeping on growing. So that has been empowered China with lots of the domestic, growth potentials in this regard, especially when the international society or international market has been going through a turbulence. I think Chinese domestic market and its, investment as well as for its, power in the manufacturing and trade has made sure that China can tough this through. And also beyond Chinese market itself, I think the adjacent market also played a very important role. For example, right now, China's export towards ASEAN nations, the Middle East, and Latin America has already been accounting for more than 40% of the Chinese export. And also ASEAN nations has been ranking number one as Chinese export partners. That is far more than America and the European Union. So that makes sure we trade off this turbulence happening in the Western market. And also, I think for Chinese government, the leadership is very important. We have issued what we call the bazooka of the policy combos. For example, in the monetary policy, in the fiscal policies, we actually has been using a lot of this kind of the policy, comprehensive policy packages to make sure that the stimulus demand can be agitated. So this, I think, is very, very important. And more than that, I think Chinese upgrading of its current economy is also a very important move. For example, if China still stick to the old paths, like building the labor-intensive products, very low-end services, then probably there's going to be a dead end for their growth. But actually, ever since 10 years ago, China started this initiative to modernize its economy, especially develop the tech-savvy industry and climb up the value chain. So that makes sure currently the Chinese products and the services still have lots of the value added and also can, dominate certain area in the whole world market, which is very hard to be shaken down from its current position. Like, Professor Yao has just mentioned, like EV, digitalization equipment, like the high-end mechanics, and also the green energy, and also the semiconductors. And all this has become the new brand name for Chinese products, and also make sure that they become the pillar to support the height and the depths of the current Chinese economy. Though that's the reason why, if you look at the quantity and also quality, that forged the Chinese resilience in its economy.
But gentlemen, here the interesting contrast. Despite these solid numbers, some Western media outlets like Reuters still describe China's economy as sluggish or on the brink. So, Professor Yao, why do you think there is such a narrative discrepancy, and what core facts are being overlooked by them?
Western media, I think sometimes they have two issues. The first issue is that they look at China's past because the standard rate of Chinese economic growth to them is two-digit. I mean, over 10%. And now China is now moving into a new high-quality development era, with China focused on quality rather than quantity. So it comes down to about 5%. So 5% for some Western media who are used to the two-digit growth of China, it is low. But people forget some major issue that because the Chinese economy has become so big, the volume of the Chinese economy is number 2 in the world, and is still increasing all the time. Last year, we have 134 trillion renminbi. So 5% economic growth, then the added amount of the net growth itself is equivalent to a middle-sized economy in the world, or one of the top 20, or close to top 20, which is remarkable. If we would have a 10% growth, I think that would be unthinkable. China doesn't need to be sustain the two-digit growth because it have a lots of problem in the environment. It have a lots of problem of resources and also urban pressure. So China had adjusted from the two-digit deliberately to the single-digit. It have a purpose of steady growth. So 5% or slightly higher than 5% like the first half of this year. For the Chinese, it is a very good figures. As I say, if China continue this way, close to 5% or slightly higher than 5%, in no time, China may be becoming the largest economy in the world. So by that time, I think the Western media would probably have a different perspective. Another factor they forgot is that because China's economy structure have changed, the high-quality manufacturing, high-quality services now have become the dominant element in China's economy and also Chinese export mix. Now, this is another important factor which is driven by domestic technological innovation. And this is going to give China a long-term competitive advantage in the international market. Domestically, I think technological innovation and a steady high quality growth will gradually improve people's actual living standard and livelihood, rather than just talking about two-digit high growth with lots of pollution, with lots of congestion. So there are different shift of concept and also perception of the Chinese economy today. As a China economist, I think what the government is doing is precisely needed at the current stage of the Chinese economic development in history. And maybe the Western media, they would come to realize that this is the kind of very good, healthy development strategy that the Chinese government is employed to drive the country toward the modernization process.
Professor Chu, any thoughts? Because the talking down of China's economy has been a familiar theme in Western media for years, right? In your view, what drives this persistent narrative? Why are some analysts and media so bent on predicting China's economic decline?
Well, I think saying the problems of Chinese economy is never a problem. I think we are frank enough and also we are humble enough to accept all kinds of the positive advices. And also for every economy, there are ups and downs. So for the economy to grow because there's economic circle to going on, not only in China, but also in every economy in the whole world. They all have this kind of the situation. But the problem is that when we are saying there are a problem with the American economy, for example, maybe at the end of this year, the American stock market is going to fall. We always say this is business cycle. This is a problem of the industries. This is a problem with the financial markets. But when it comes to China, the Western media always say, okay, it's about China itself. It's Chinese nature. It's China's institution. It's about Chinese governance. So when similar problem happens in China, the reason are always very, very different. It's not about economics. It's not about financial studies. It's always that Chinese people will have a problem. So here you see this is a very pathological mindset of the Western media. I think that's the reason why for that is always they politicize, the economic problems and using this kind of, tones and rhetoric actually to bash down the Chinese growth and also to solidify their own alliances. And also, I think the bias and the stereotype in their mind is also a very important problem. For example, the current, economic growth model are still based on the Washington consensus. So many economies, especially the second tier and or some mid and low level economists in the West, they all try to use this Washington consensus to weigh China or measure Chinese, industrial policies as well as for our systems or our market-based economy. So that's kind of be a problem. No matter how fast Chinese economy grow or we're slowing down. There always is a problem when Chinese economy grows very fast. They say, okay, this is a warped economic growth model. It's pathologic. And when Chinese economy slows down, you see, they say, okay, hey, you see, it finally happens. You see, there is a problem. Finally get exposed. So they never actually realize what's the real essence of the Chinese growth, the Chinese people's wisdom, the leadership, and the long-term vision, and a comprehensive and a balanced vision of the Chinese economy. And they never take that into consideration. And also have to point out, this is internet era. So the data traffic or the eyeball economy is also a reason behind that. Lots of the media, they find out because the whole world, especially in the Western society, they have this kind of the stereotype. So when you say more about the negative image about China and coping with people's stereotype, you will have higher clicking rate. So the more you badmouth about China, people will love to hear about it. So why not? You get the money to earn, you get the attention to draw, and also you can release your anger towards China because China is getting stronger and richer more than you. So I think this is just a one stone, three birds. That's the reason why they always say that about China and talking down to China. But I don't think that this is actually a good attitude. I think the real good attitude is people to people exchange, is actually to see the real strengths about Chinese economy and how China is contributing to the world economy and the world trade network. And of course, I'm not saying China is perfect. China also have lots of existing problems, and how we can learn the experiences and the lessons from China and also work with China together so that we can make this world whole lot better together. I think that is, and that should be the real attitude that we can have together.
Acknowledge China for what it truly is. Gentlemen, let's turn to external challenges, especially the U.S. ramping up tariffs across a wide range of countries, intensifying economic pressure globally, including greater oppression on China over high-tech sectors, export controls, etc. Despite all this, China seems to have held firm. So, Professor Yao, what's enabling this economic resilience?
My daughter yesterday is in a London bus station, and he sent me a photo showing BRD, the electrical driving machine for a London absolutely beautiful bus.
The
And I was very surprised. It also gave me a thought that because Chinese manufacturers such as BRD and Huawei produce such beautiful product and livable product to the most advanced, most picky market, London and other places of the world. I think this is the intrinsic gene of China's economy. It is able to innovate, to outperform the competitor in the world. Nowadays you have a new EV in China, you sell for, let's say, 100,000 renminbi, but the same product can sell at least 300,000 renminbi in London or in Western Europe. So this is why, the Western countries, they impose a very high tariff on Chinese EV. Despite this, the Chinese EV is still penetrating absolutely powerful into every corner of the world. Motor export, number one, outperforming Japan, outperforming Germany in just the last few years. And this year, 2025, is going to be another miracle years that there's going to be significant improvement of BRD and other motor producers in China. And this is just one industry. Actually, China has been very excellent in many other industries. Despite the kinds of technical embargo from the United States to export high quality, small size chips to China, China is actually one of the biggest producers of computer chips. This year, the export of the computer chip, only the first 6 months, is already more than 670 billion renminbi. And this explains why China's export minus import, the trade surplus, is getting a historical height in the first half of this year. It is predicted that China's export minus export surplus this year would be more than $1 trillion US dollars. So the strong driving force behind this kinds of export in domestic market and the uplifting of the domestic product and the living condition and quality of the 1.4 billion Chinese consumers is the genes that explain China's success. Because people go to the street, right? Go to any city in the street in the midnight, it's still opening shops and very activity. In Western Europe, in London, for example, up to 7 o'clock, the street is almost quiet. Nobody walk in the street. But China is almost 24 hours. This kinds of traditional culture, this kinds of business activity, it is a kind of not only the technological innovation, but also the people's habit and culture, which is constantly producing energy to drive the economy development and dynamism, which is a very unique phenomenon to me.
Professor Chu, what's your thoughts on this? Compared to the earlier phase of the trade war from U.S. President Donald Trump's previous term, how's China better positioned this time? What progress has been made in supply chains, technological innovation, and self-resilience?
Well, I think we already have one round of the trade conflict with America, and this is the second time. And I think for this time, Chinese economy is much more prepared to confront this kind of the challenge. For example, number one, supply chain. I still remember back in 2018 or even earlier than that, Chinese supply chain are more domestic oriented, which means most of the key raw materials supply are not sufficient, which means most of the supply or the production of parts are based in China. But right now, if I take a look, many parts of the Chinese supply chain has already been outsourced. For example, China and Russia and Middle Asia country and Middle East country, we have already signed the framework and trade deals on many key raw materials and reservations. So, which means that China actually can have the ample supply of the key raw materials from 30 days to more than 90 days. This is very important, which means if there are something extreme happening, so with in 3 months, if the whole world, even if I'm talking about the extreme, even if the whole world shutting down toward China, so Chinese supply chain can actually be functional for more than 3 months. But of course, this is not going to be that bad. Just take a look at Russia and Ukraine. Even at that point, their supply chain has not been fully shut down. So for China, I don't think that can actually be a problem, but I think China is get fully prepared for the extreme scenario. And also talking about high-end supplies. For example, a lot of people saying, okay, America is blocking China in the chips and the semiconductors. So if there are some problem happening to, supply chain this time, Chinese high-end economy, high-end manufacturing industry is going to be shut down. No, actually, just talking about the self-sufficient rate, about the EV chips. Well, back in 2018, Chinese self-sufficient rate is just less than 5%. But right now, it's more than 25%. And that what I'm talking about, only about the high-end chips. If you're talking about functioning chips, China has already been 100% ready. Because, yes, we understand 4 nanometer chips and semiconductors is wonderful. But if this supply has been shut down to China, but China can be fully capable to build 7 nanometers or 10 nanometers of the semiconductors or chips, and the function is basically the same. Only difference is just a little bit larger. That's it. But for the EV, but for the airplane, for the high-speed rail, I think that is totally enough, and there's no difference against the size of the carriers we're talking about. And also talking about the other technologies, China has actually been issued lots of the policies to support the technology development. Actually, in the past 5 years, our intensity on the investment towards the high technology is phenomenal. The quantum communication, AI, and green energy, China has already become the tier one in the whole world. And talking about the opening up, well, back in 2018 or 2015, we are not that good in the Belt and Road Initiative because the Belt and Road Initiative just started. And our global supply chain is not that comprehensive. But if you take a look at right now, I think the RCEP and also China is trying to join the DEPA and the CPTPP, and trying to have the CIIE and also get the Shanghai Expo, and all this kind of arrangement show that China are fully confident and ready to open wider and also to welcome more of the foreign investment and trade to get into China, and also China is ready to deploy its presence of the supply chain all over the world. And China has so many paralleled capacities in Latin America and ASEAN nations, in the Middle Asia. So that makes sure that Chinese economy is not Chinese economy itself, but also it's comprehensively embedded in the whole world supply chain. Even in America right now, I think there are so many Chinese enterprises has already been there. So I don't think you can cut China out. When you're talking about you're going to cut China out, you're cutting yourself down. So I think for this time, China is ready. And China is not confrontational. We're not confronting anyone. We're just trying to work with the whole world. And I think we are confident that not only we want to work with them, but they need to work with us.
Mm-hmm. Then, Professor Chu, looking ahead to the second half of 2025, do you think China can sustain this momentum?
Well, I think right now there is a huge loud voice about the de-risk with China, but I don't think China is replaceable. Number one, China has technology. We have 5G, we have the high-speed rail, we have ultra high voltage, we have the green energy, we have the EV. So all this has already been in the full supply chain, and everybody needs to be compatible with Chinese standard. Secondly, China still have the lowest cost slash highest performance ratio against many competitors in the whole world. In Shanghai Delta, in Guangzhou Delta, and I think our delivery is still 30% faster than our competitor in the whole world, and also our quality is more than 10% higher than the other parallel competitors. So for the global investors, the manufacturers, without China, your things is going to be worse and more expensive, and also more sustainable. Chinese green energy has been prevailing in all industrial sectors, which make Chinese green development standards much higher. European Union, you want to get carbon peaking, and also for America, you want to have your products cost lower and lower in the future. So only with green energy that your marginal cost is going to get lower and lower in the future. With more green energy, you use it. So that makes sure that Chinese edge is still being there. Plus, you will need Chinese market. We still have 1.4 billion of efficient market, not like India. They have 1.5 billion of population, but how many people can actually consume high quality products? I don't think there are even 100 million in that 1.5 billion. But in China, we have 400 million to start with. Right now, the speed is start growing. Any nation, any companies, if you want to grow, you cannot leave Chinese market. So I think that's the confidence we have. But we are not going to use it to blackmail our partners. We are going to only use that to cooperate with our partners and also to achieve win-win result.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, gentlemen, for those valuable insights. Dr. Yao Shujie, Chang Hong Professor of Economics at Chongqing University, Professor Chu Qiang, Fellow of Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China. That's all the time we have for this edition of Biz Today. I'm Anna. Thanks for listening.